Duncan McNabb here, 19th of August 2024, and the story this afternoon about murder, mayhem, drug deals, outlaw motorcycle gangs, inept criminals of a remarkable standard, and also an aspiring author, all wrapped into one big yarn. Jay Malkoun was the former head of the Comancheros outlaw motorcycle gang in Victoria and a convicted drug trafficker, and he's written a book. I'm not sure if the book is a tell-all or tell you what I think you should know. According to the publisher's blurb, and I'll quote here, turns out almost everyone can use a friendly neighbourhood gangster in their life now and again. I'm not sure about that sentiment, but PR to sell a book is PR to sell a book. The blurb goes on to say that Jay Malkoun isn't the type of man who lets a little thing like being blown up slow him down. In March 2019, after his morning gym session, a car bomb detonated the Mercedes Jay was sat in. It was an explosion heard around the world as global media, law enforcement agencies, and undercover cartels speculated on who had moved to assassinate the former gangster and retired leader of one of the world's most feared and powerful underworld organisations. Let me just pause there for a brief moment just to correct the blurb slightly. He was a leader, but of the Victorian chapter of one of the world's most feared and powerful underworld organisations. There are a lot of people above him in this argument. And I'll press on from that point. There are 100 possible suspects, the blurb said. Jay has some ideas about it too. I'd take a punt there are quite a lot fewer than 100 possible suspects, but Jay is now back in Australia and has joined other crooks and colourful types in publishing their version of history, or it seems to be a common term these days, my truth. One thing I learned early in the investigation game was that there are many versions of the truth, and they were usually doled out as required. I've yet to encounter anyone who has told the whole truth. And of course, then there are the facts, but maybe that's something for another time. Mr Malkoun's book prompted recollection of a story in which he was involved, and one that ended with a return to Sydney by extradition, not by choice, of a young bloke called Anthony Bagnato. To get matters sorted up front, Mr Bagnato was extradited back to Australia to face charges in 2022 alleging his involvement in the murder of a Sydney bloke called Bradley Dillon back in 2014. It's a matter before the courts, so I won't delve further. Now, in a separate matter and in Thailand, Mr Bagnato found himself in strife, which resulted in his conviction for the 2015 murder of Hells Angels heavyweight and mate of Jay Malkoun, one bloke called Wayne Schneider. Schneider had taken refuge in Thailand from the Australian coppers, who wanted to chat to him about a massive methamphetamine importation and a few other drug-related things. Friendships between members of outlaw gangs that are occasionally at war with each other aren't common, but they do occur. And often, and I can't comment specifically on this case, driven by opportunity. And I always remember the old Hells Angels wisdom that the greatest risk to a Hells Angel is another Hells Angel. It's that sort of organisation, and as we'll soon see, quite relevant to the story. Both Wayne Schneider and Anthony Bagnato had also once been members of the St Michael Christian Brothers Fight Club in Lewisham and allegedly owned a gym together in Marrickville. The Fight Club had started as a local youth group, laudable intentions, but was soon taken over by outlaw bikers and their hangarounds of the would-be members, or those who like to be close to the outlaws and get that vicarious thrill from their company. If that sort of thing turns you on, good on you. The Fight Club quickly became an underground fight club where participants battled in Muay Thai. Bagnato was a genuine champion, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if money might have changed hands at some of these bouts. Wayne Schneider first came to public attention in 2006 during the Sydney Outlaw Biker War. He was the likely shooter of a bouncer at the Sapphire Suite, a nightclub in King's Cross. Schneider went into hiding, and for the 18 months that followed was one of the 10 most wanted men by New South Wales Police. A subsequent prosecution failed in 2019 when witnesses all had sudden memory losses. Schneider was also deeply involved in drug trafficking and was reckoned by the New South Wales Crime Commission to be the state's top drug supplier, particularly methamphetamine. But Sydney was getting very, very warm for Mr Schneider. He'd been a high priority target since his successful day in court, and in February 2012 decided to shift his operational headquarters to the outlaw biker haven of Pattaya, aptly named by the head of Europol Media at one stage as, quote, a human zoo, end quote. The place had started life as a lovely little beachside town until it became a place for rest and recreation, R&R it was commonly known, for US servicemen in the Vietnam War. Pattaya went downhill fast and is now only slowly recovering from what is a justifiably seedy reputation. It's now pitching itself as a family destination, but I reckon that will take a long time to become a reality. Wayne Schneider's departure was also hastened by a New South Wales police raid on 14 February 2012 on meth labs in southwest Sydney in which they'd found Schneider's DNA. Schneider, curious enough, found out that the police had found out and did a runner very quickly. On 15 February, he was on a plane, first stop Dubai, now a biker haven, and to use a favourite quote, a sunny place for shady people, and then on to Pattaya, where the company was shadier and the bonking and booze easier to get, pretty much outlaw biker paradise. Pattaya has also been popular with the outlaws from Europe and Australia since the late 1990s, when it became a refuge for senior banditos in the aftermath of what was called the Great Nordic War, where they battled the Hells Angels throughout Europe. In Pattaya in those days, authorities asked few questions. It's full of crooks, close to the amphetamine and heroin hubs around the world, and there are ample opportunities to launder money. The Hells Angels followed the banditos there, got there in about 2010 and started a PR campaign to win over locals by sponsoring Muay Thai bouts for charities. Outlaw motorcycle gangs up there coexist quite comfortably, and instead of being split by gang affiliations, they may be united by networking opportunities for criminal enterprise. In the outlaw motorcycle gang world, money is king. Everything else is to be discussed. Schneider in Pattaya lived in a $5,200 Australian dollar per month house in the luxurious, gated and allegedly very secure Jomtien Park villas on the other side of the headland from the sleazy clamour of downtown Pattaya. Jay Malkoun, then the former president of the Comanchero outlaw motorcycle gang, was in residence there with him. According to Mr Malkoun's recent literary outing, he'd been staying with his old mate Wayne while he was in Thailand for medical treatment. Wayne was a notorious party animal, but by comparison, Jay was quite restrained. Anthony Bagnato and his mate Schneider lived separately in Pattaya, but Bagnato was Schneider's gopher and bodyguard. The two were also allegedly putting together a local version of the St Michael's Fight Club. One reason ventured for Schneider's need of a bodyguard was because some of his customers in the drug business had allegedly found the product he'd sold them to be substandard. And of course, there are also local ne'er-do-wells who'd heard Schneider was allegedly sitting on a big pile of cash made in a massive international drug deals. So they felt he could share the wealth. That's sort of how criminals think. Schneider also had one other problem in that he believed Anthony Bagnato was loyal. Oops. On the night of the 29th of November 2015, Schneider had been out carousing as usual and headed home in the wee small hours. Jay Malkoun had left festivities earlier and gone back to the apartment. He said he was soundly asleep when some crooks came calling. 4 men wearing bandanas and one without a bandana crept past the dosing security, entered Schneider's villa and abducted him. It was a very noisy affair, apparently, with the Bangkok Post newspaper reporting the finding of bullet casings at the villa and screams that woke the security guards, who recognised Bagnato as the bloke without his face covered. The guards also got the registration number of the Toyota ute used to motor off with Schneider in the back. The event was also, just to add to it, recorded on CCTV. Jay Malkoun allegedly later told police he'd gone to bed early as he was feeling unwell and didn't hear a peep all night. Mr Schneider, however, was taken to a house not terribly far away, probably a couple of 100 metres, which was leased to a UK national called Douglas Shoebridge and his Thai partner. This is where, in this villa, Schneider was tied to a chair, tortured, probably to persuade him to disclose where he kept his massive stash of cash. He was beaten with a baton and knuckle dusters. It was rumoured that Schneider was in poor shape thanks to his addiction to ice, and he died under torture. The principal cause for his death was later found to be blunt force trauma to the head. The crooks put his body into the back of the ute and took him for a drive, and burying him in a 1.8 metre deep grave in woodlands about 30 kilometres south of Pattaya. What these criminal masterminds didn't know was that security had also called the police, who arrived after the hapless Schneider and his kidnappers had departed. However, by morning the police had found the Toyota which had been hired by Shoebridge's partner. They were simply following the trail of paperwork. that was quite obvious to them. When the ute was returned to the hire car company, the police seized it and used GPS to track to the murder scene. They also located another car rented by a partner on Bagnato's behalf, and in that they found 2 tasers, a semi-automatic rifle, a semi-automatic pistol with a laser sight, and plenty of ammunition. The police also found a motorcycle rented to Tyler Gerard, then a 21-year-old American mate of Bagnato's. The police searched the crime scenes, and they had 2 by this point, and found blood-soaked fabrics and pillows. They found duct tape, and they found the used cartridge cases. Then they used the GPS on the Toyota again to lead them to Schneider's grave. According to Jay Malkoun, while all this was going on, he had a chat with police and was soon on a flight home to Dubai. Very wise move, I would suggest. After he departed, there were also some media reports in the Australian press alleging that Jay had also been busy setting up Comanchero chapters in Central Europe and Chechnya. Jay later moved to Athens, and it was in 2019 where he was nearly killed in the car bombing I mentioned before. As an aside here, Jay had been at the gym that morning, as we mentioned. He'd gone back to his white Mercedes AMG, hopped on board, and the bomb exploded. Jay was seriously injured. His former Comanchero mate and national leader of the Comancheros, Mick Howie, had similar issues when leaving a gym in Sydney in 2018. He was heading to his car in the parking lot when he was shot to death. What I deduce from that is a fitness routine is a great idea, but it's best to vary your times a little bit. Now, meanwhile, back in Thailand, Bagnato finally realised his numerous blunders and decided to do a run into the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. However, it didn't take police too long to track his escape route, find his hotel, and arrest him. There is some remarkable vision of it on YouTube of the burly Bagnato being whisked away on the seat of a motor scooter, handcuffed and scrunched between 2 officers. Very squeezy by the look of it. Bagnato was later convicted of Schneider's murder, sentenced to death in Bangkok, and put on death row at Bang Kwang prison, variously known as the Bangkok Hilton or locally as the Big Tiger because it eats men alive. However, in 2018 he got a bit of good luck, reportedly given a reprieve. The murder conviction was overturned, and he was then subsequently convicted of assault. He was extradited to Australia, as I mentioned, in 2022. Young Tyler Gerard, who was also involved in this case, was caught at the Thai-Cambodian border. He didn't make it across. Quickly admitted to what was a minor role in the events. He was sentenced to 2 years, and shortly after his release was arrested for his part in a 500-kilogram drug importation, allegedly with an Australian called Luke Cook. Pattaya, as we can see, is a rather busy place if you happen to be involved in crime. Now to the final twist in this story. Schneider's body was released to his family, and it arrived back in Sydney, poised for burial, on the 10th of December 2015. However, the New South Wales Police intervened and had the body taken away from the funeral director to the Sydney morgue, and at the morgue, they wanted to be sure that Schneider was Schneider and not a scam. The body was examined, and the medical examiner concluded that it was Mr. Schneider. Jay Malkoun remains intact, is now living in Melbourne, consulting and writing apparently. Thank you. I'll be back with other stories very shortly.